I was 28, pregnant, and just got fired illegally. My boss thought I'd go quietly. Instead, I exposed everything and watched his entire company collapse. This is how I did it. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought my life was finally coming together. Good job as a marketing manager at a tech startup, supportive husband, and now a baby on the way. I walked into my boss's office, excited to share the news. 2 weeks later, they fired me. They said it was budget cuts and restructuring, but I knew the truth. They fired me because I was pregnant, and that was the biggest mistake they ever made, because I didn't just file a lawsuit, I destroyed their entire business from the ground up. I worked at a company called TechVision. It was one of those startups that loved talking about being like a family and having great work culture. They had beanbags in the office and free snacks. They posted about work-life balance on social media. All of it was fake. The CEO, Richard, was the type who hired young people so he could overwork and underpay them. My supervisor, Karen, was his right-hand person, and she made it clear she thought other women were competition, not colleagues. When I told them I was pregnant, their reactions said everything. Richard's smile vanished instantly. Karen actually rolled her eyes. They made me the fakest congratulations I've ever heard. Then the questions started. How long would I take for maternity leave? Could I really handle my workload while pregnant? They made it obvious that my pregnancy was an inconvenience, not something to celebrate. 2 weeks later, they called me into a meeting. HR was there, which should have been my first warning sign. Richard started talking about company restructuring and budget cuts. He said they had to let me go, effective immediately. They handed me a barely legal severance package and told me to clear my desk within an hour. I asked them directly if this was because of my pregnancy. Richard looked me straight in the eye and said absolutely not. Karen added that they'd been planning this restructuring for months. But I wasn't stupid. I just closed the biggest client deal in company history 3 weeks earlier. My performance reviews were perfect. No one else was being let go. This was illegal pregnancy discrimination, and they knew it. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. Not just because I lost my job, but because I felt powerless. Finding a new job while pregnant would be nearly impossible. My husband's salary alone wouldn't cover our mortgage and medical bills. I was terrified. But then the fear turned into anger. They violated federal law because they thought I'd be too scared or too broke to fight back. They completely underestimated me. The first call I made was to an employment lawyer named Susan, who specialized in workplace discrimination. I told her everything, and when she heard the timeline, her eyes lit up. She said I had a strong case, but we needed solid evidence. I smiled and told her I had plenty. I've always been organized. I had every single email I'd sent or received from the company, performance reviews going back 3 years, client testimonials praising my work, documentation of every successful project I'd completed. And here's the best part. I had text messages from Karen where she complained about employees taking maternity leave. She'd literally texted me months earlier saying pregnant employees were a burden on the team. At the time, I thought she was just bitter. Now it was evidence. Susan and I spent a month building an airtight case. We filed a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We requested all company documents related to my firing. And during the discovery process, we found something huge. I wasn't the first woman they'd done this to. 2 other women had been fired after announcing pregnancies in the past 4 years. Both had signed NDAs and taken small settlements because they couldn't afford long legal battles. But I could afford to fight. My husband and I decided we'd do whatever it took, and I was going to make sure they paid for what they did to all of us. While the lawsuit moved through the system, I started investigating TechVision deeper. I looked into their business practices, client relationships, and financial records. What I discovered was incredible. The company was shady in ways that went far beyond discriminating against pregnant women. They were lying to clients about their capabilities. They'd promise services they couldn't actually deliver, then scramble to outsource the work last minute. They were billing clients for hours that were never actually worked. And the absolute best part? They were using unlicensed software for several major projects, which directly violated their contracts with at least 3 big clients. I'd worked closely with these clients during my time there. I'd built those relationships personally, and I still had all their contact information. So I reached out, not as an angry ex-employee, but as someone genuinely concerned about the quality of work they were receiving. I asked casual questions about their recent projects. Were they happy with the results? Had they noticed any issues with billing or timelines? I planted seeds of doubt without directly accusing anyone of anything. 2 of my former clients started asking TechVision harder questions. They requested detailed audits of the hours they'd been billed for. They asked for proof of software licensing for their projects. TechVision couldn't provide any of it because none of it existed. The fraud was real, and now clients were digging into it. 6 months into my pregnancy, my lawsuit became public. The EEOC found probable cause for discrimination, which meant my case was incredibly strong. Local news outlets picked up the story because pregnancy discrimination cases always get attention. Suddenly, TechVision wasn't just fighting me in court, they were fighting for their entire reputation. That's when current employees started coming forward. 3 women contacted my lawyer with their own stories of discrimination and harassment at the company. One had been demoted immediately after returning from maternity leave. Another had been passed over for promotions repeatedly, while less qualified men got promoted around her. My individual case was growing into a potential class action lawsuit. And then the clients started leaving. The 2 I'd gently pushed to investigate found the billing fraud and licensing violations. They terminated their contracts immediately and demanded full refunds. One of them was a major corporation that threatened their own lawsuit for breach of contract. Other clients heard about the discrimination lawsuit and the fraud, and they didn't want their brands associated with a company that treated people this way. Within 3 months, TechVision lost 60% of their client base. Richard panicked and tried damage control. He went on social media to tell his side of the story. He called me a disgruntled employee making false accusations. Huge mistake. My lawyer immediately released some of our evidence publicly, including Karen's text messages about pregnant employees being burdens. The internet destroyed him. His comments got ratioed into oblivion. People found his personal accounts and left reviews on every platform. The company couldn't survive the hit. They lost too many clients too fast. They couldn't make payroll for their remaining employees. People started quitting because they saw what was coming. Karen abandoned ship first and got a job at another company, but her reputation followed her everywhere. Her new employer discovered her role in the discrimination case during her probationary period and let her go. Richard tried desperately to keep TechVision alive, but it was over. They filed for bankruptcy 8 months after they fired me. The company shut down completely. 30 people lost their jobs, and I did feel guilty about that. But those people would have lost their jobs anyway once the fraud eventually caught up with the company. At least this way, the illegal behavior got exposed and stopped. My lawsuits settled before trial. I can't share the exact amount because of the settlement agreement, but let's just say I didn't need to worry about finding work for a very long time. More importantly, the 2 other women who'd been silenced got their settlements reopened and received proper compensation. None of us had to sign NDAs this time. We could talk freely about what happened. I had my daughter while all of this was unfolding, a healthy, beautiful baby girl. My husband and I used the settlement to pay off our mortgage and start a consulting business from home. I reached out to all my former clients from TechVision and offered my services independently. Most of them hired me immediately. They'd valued my work all along, just not the company I'd worked for. Richard tried starting another company a year later. It failed in 6 months because nobody wanted to work with him. His reputation was completely destroyed. Last I heard, he's working a regular corporate job somewhere. No longer the big shot CEO he thought he was. I started speaking publicly about pregnancy discrimination. I did interviews and wrote articles. I wanted other women to know they didn't have to accept being treated illegally. They could fight back and win. People ask if I regret that the company collapsed and people lost jobs. Here is my answer. I didn't destroy TechVision. Richard and Karen destroyed it by building a company on discrimination, lies, and fraud. I just exposed what was already there.
They fired me thinking I'd disappear quietly. They thought I'd be too scared, too broke, or too overwhelmed with a baby to fight back. They were completely wrong. Today, my daughter is 3. My business is thriving, and they lost everything. If this story fired you up, hit subscribe. More revenge stories are coming, and you don't want to miss them.